The harsh winter wind howled through Manhattan's dark streets as Diana's heart pounded against her chest. Her worn sneakers slapped against the wet pavement as she ran, each breath burning in her lungs. Behind her, she could hear the heavy footsteps of her pursuers and their angry shouts echoing off the towering buildings. "Stop that street rat," a man's voice boomed. But Diana couldn't stop. Not with 6-year-old Tommy clutched tightly in her arms, his small body shivering against hers. The child had been sleeping in a cardboard box when the developers' hired thugs came to clear out the homeless encampment. They'd already roughed up several people, including an elderly woman who'd begged them to wait until morning. "Almost there," Tommy, Diana whispered, ducking into a narrow alley. "Hold on tight." At 16, Diana was small for her age. Years of malnutrition had taken their toll, but desperation gave her strength. She'd lived on these streets long enough to know all the shortcuts and hiding places. The real challenge was staying quiet enough to lose their pursuers while carrying a terrified child. A bottle shattered against the wall near her head, making Tommy whimper. Diana pressed deeper into the shadows, her mind racing. 2 blocks to the shelter, 2 blocks to safety, but her legs were burning and the footsteps were getting closer. "Please," Tommy whispered, his tears soaking into her thin jacket. "I'm scared." "Trust me," Diana breathed, thinking of her father Peter and how he'd saved her countless times. Now it was her turn to protect someone else. Suddenly, headlights illuminated the alley. Diana's heart stopped as a black SUV blocked their escape route. A tall figure stepped out. She recognized him instantly. Nathan Warren, the property developer's son who'd humiliated her family just months ago when they tried to return his father's credit card. Time seemed to freeze as their eyes met across the rain-slicked alley. In that moment, Diana saw something shift in Nathan's expression: recognition, then shock, then something else she couldn't quite read. Behind her, the footsteps grew louder. Diana clutched Tommy tighter, ready to fight if she had to. She'd learned long ago that sometimes compassion came with a price, but she'd gladly pay it to protect an innocent child just as someone had once protected her. What happened next would change everything. But to understand that night's true significance, we must go back to where it all began, with a lost credit card and 2 families whose destinies would become inexplicably intertwined. If you find this opening chapter intriguing and want to join Diana on her journey of courage, compassion, and justice, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful stories that touch hearts and inspire positive change in our world. Thank you for being part of this storytelling community. Life on the streets of Manhattan was a daily test of survival for Diana and her father Peter. Their home consisted of a relatively dry corner in an abandoned building on 43rd Street, where Peter had carefully constructed a makeshift shelter using discarded cardboard and tattered blankets. Every morning they would pack up their few possessions: a worn backpack containing 2 changes of clothes, a dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, and a faded photograph of happier times. Peter, despite their circumstances, carried himself with quiet dignity. His clothes, though threadbare, were always meticulously clean, and his grey-streaked hair was neatly combed. Those who looked closely might notice his excellent posture and articulate speech patterns, subtle hints of his former life that he tried to conceal. Few would guess that this man, who now collected recyclables to earn a few dollars, once stood before lecture halls full of eager students as Professor Peter Mitchell, Ph.D. in economics. Diana had inherited her father's resilient spirit and unwavering moral compass. At 16, she possessed a wisdom far beyond her years, shaped by hardship but untainted by bitterness. Her dark hair was often tied back in a practical braid, and her clothes, though second-hand, were carefully maintained. She spent her mornings helping younger homeless children learn to read in a makeshift classroom. She'd created in the local park, using discarded magazines and newspapers as textbooks. Their daily routine was a carefully choreographed dance of survival. Dawn would find them at St. Michael's Church, where they could wash up in the bathroom before the morning crowd arrived. By 7 a.m., they would be at the public library, where Diana would study independently, her father having taught her everything from algebra to literature during their years on the streets. Afternoons were spent searching for food and safe places to sleep, always moving, always watching, always helping others despite their own desperate circumstances. The bond between father and daughter went beyond mere survival. Each evening, no matter how difficult the day had been, they would share what they called their gratitude ritual, sitting together in their makeshift shelter. They would each name 3 things they were thankful for. Peter never failed to mention his daughter's strength and kindness, while Diana often spoke of her father's unwavering love and guidance. Yet there were moments when the weight of their situation became almost unbearable. On cold nights, Peter would give Diana his only blanket, pretending he wasn't cold. During heavy rains, he would stand for hours holding a piece of plastic over their corner to keep her dry. When food was scarce, he would claim he'd already eaten, ensuring Diana had enough. These sacrifices did not go unnoticed by Diana, who saw how her father's face had grown gaunt and his hands had become rough from manual labor. Their relationship was built on an unshakable foundation of trust and honesty. Peter had taught Diana that integrity was their most valuable possession, something that couldn't be stolen or lost. We might not have a roof over our heads, he would often say, but we have our dignity, our principles, and each other. This philosophy would soon be tested in ways they never expected, when a simple act of honesty would collide with the privileged world of the Warren family, setting in motion events that would challenge everything they believed in. The streets had taught them harsh lessons about humanity, both its cruelty and its unexpected kindnesses. They'd experienced the sting of being ignored by passers-by, the humiliation of being chased away from storefronts, and the bitter cold of winter nights when shelters were full. But they'd also known the generosity of other homeless individuals who shared their meager resources, the compassion of certain local shopkeepers who would slip them day-old bread, and the unwavering support they offered each other. The Warren name cast a long shadow across Manhattan's skyline, each gleaming tower a testament to their influence and power. From his penthouse office on the 87th floor of Warren Plaza, Aaron Warren surveyed his empire with the calculating gaze of a man accustomed to seeing the world as assets and opportunities. At 60, his steel-gray hair and expertly tailored suits projected an image of success that masked a ruthlessness known only to those who had dared to stand in his way. Warren Industries had grown from a modest real estate firm into a corporate behemoth under Aaron's leadership, but the cost of that success was written in invisible ink across countless lives. His latest project, the Manhattan Renaissance Initiative, was marketed as urban renewal, but essentially meant displacing hundreds of low-income families and homeless individuals. To Aaron, they were merely obstacles to progress, numbers on a spreadsheet that needed to be cleared. His son Nathan, at 28, was being groomed to inherit this empire. Educated at prestigious private schools and groomed in the family's tradition of privilege, Nathan moved through life with the easy confidence of someone who had never known want. His carefully curated Instagram feed showcased a life of yacht parties, private jet travel, and charity galas where he donated more money in a single evening than most people earned in a year. Yet beneath the polished exterior lurked a growing emptiness he couldn't quite name. The Warren household operated with mechanical precision. Their Fifth Avenue mansion was staffed by a small army of servants who knew better than to speak unless spoken to. Meals were served at exactly the same time each day, with Aaron using these occasions to drill his business philosophy into his son. Sentiment is the enemy of success, he would say, cutting into his perfectly cooked steak. The moment you start seeing people instead of opportunities, you've lost your edge. But Aaron harbored a secret that gnawed at him during sleepless nights, a truth about his own past that threatened to unravel everything he'd built. The photograph he kept locked in his desk drawer, showing two identical baby boys in an orphanage, was his only connection to a history he'd spent decades trying to forget. One of those babies had been adopted by the wealthy Warren family, the other had disappeared into the foster care system. The guilt of this long-buried truth drove him to build higher towers, accumulate more wealth, as if success could somehow justify the path he'd chosen. Nathan, meanwhile, struggled with his own demons. His mother had died when he was young, and Aaron had responded by burying himself in work, leaving Nathan to be raised by a succession of nannies and boarding schools. He learned early that showing emotion was a sign of weakness, that compassion was a luxury they couldn't afford. His relationships were superficial, his friendships based on social status rather than genuine connection. The Warren Empire was built on carefully maintained appearances. Their charitable foundation made headlines with massive donations, while their corporate practices quietly destroyed communities. They hosted fundraisers for homeless shelters while their development projects created more homeless people. This cognitive dissonance was the air Nathan breathed, the water he swam in, until he no longer noticed the contradiction. Yet lately something had begun to shift in Nathan. Small cracks appeared in his carefully constructed worldview. He found himself noticing the homeless people his car drove past each morning, wondering about their stories. The satisfaction he once felt from closing million-dollar deals was fading, replaced by a nagging sense that something fundamental was missing from his life. These feelings confused and irritated him, like an itch he couldn't quite reach. Little did he know that his world was about to collide with Diana and Peter's in a way that would shake the very foundation of everything he believed. The Warren dynasty, built on secrets and sacrifice, was about to face its greatest challenge not from business rivals or market forces, but from a simple act of honesty by a homeless girl and her father. Manhattan's glittering facade masked a city deeply divided by invisible lines of wealth and privilege. From the luxury penthouses of the Upper East Side to the makeshift shelters beneath bridge overpasses, two different worlds existed side by side, rarely acknowledging each other except in moments of conflict. The gap between these worlds was growing wider by the day, a social chasm that reflected a larger crisis gripping the nation. Statistics painted a stark picture. While luxury condominiums sat empty as investment properties, the city's homeless population had swelled to record numbers. Shelters were overcrowded, underfunded, and often dangerous. Single parents, former professionals, veterans, and even entire families found themselves living on streets that grew more hostile by the day. New anti-homeless architecture appeared regularly: benches with dividers, sprinkler systems in doorways, spikes in alcoves designed to make the displaced invisible rather than address the root causes of their situation. The city's power structure actively perpetuated this divide. Real estate developers, backed by politicians who benefited from their generous campaign contributions, pushed through urban renewal projects that systematically displaced lower-income residents. The local news channels, owned by the same corporate interests, painted the homeless as dangerous criminals rather than victims of systematic failure. Police officers were pressured to clean up certain areas before major events, forcing people to move without providing any alternatives. At City Hall, corruption festered beneath a veneer of civic responsibility. Building permits were expedited for those with the right connections, while safety violations in low-income housing went uninspected. Zoning laws were selectively enforced, and public resources were disproportionately allocated to wealthy neighborhoods. The city's homeless services department operated with a budget that had been cut every year for the past decade, while tax breaks for luxury developments increased. The public library had become an unofficial daycare for homeless children, where overworked librarians often provided informal education and safe haven. Public parks were battlegrounds where mothers pushing designer strollers would call the police on homeless teenagers trying to sleep on benches. Emergency rooms turned away those who couldn't provide insurance, while private clinics offered boutique medical services to the wealthy. Yet amid this stark inequality, pockets of resistance and hope emerged. Grassroots organizations fought for affordable housing and better social services. Some local business owners quietly helped their homeless neighbors, providing food, temporary work, or simply treating them with dignity. Community activists documented police harassment and organized protests against discriminatory policies. Religious institutions opened their doors as unofficial shelters, despite facing fines for violating occupancy regulations. The education system reflected these same disparities. While private school students enjoyed state-of-the-art facilities and individualized attention, public schools in poorer neighborhoods struggled with overcrowded classrooms and outdated textbooks. Homeless students faced particular challenges, trying to maintain their studies without access to basic necessities or stable living conditions. The dream of education as a path out of poverty became increasingly difficult to achieve. Weather, which the wealthy experienced from climate-controlled environments, was a matter of survival for the homeless population. Summer brought the risk of heatstroke, winter the threat of freezing, and each storm created new challenges for those living on the streets. Climate-controlled luxury stores would call security on homeless people seeking refuge from extreme temperatures, while public cooling and warming centers were few and far between. This was the backdrop against which Diana and Peter's story would unfold, a city of stark contrasts and systemic injustice, where compassion was often sacrificed for profit, and where the simple act of existing without a permanent address was increasingly criminalized. Yet it was also a city where small acts of kindness could ripple outward, where individual choices could challenge the status quo, and where the human spirit could triumph over seemingly insurmountable odds. The coming intersection of the Warren family's world of privilege with Diana and Peter's daily struggle for survival would expose these contradictions in ways that no one could have predicted. The morning had started like any other for Diana, weaving through the early crowds of Manhattan's financial district. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of coffee from nearby cafes and the faint mustiness of fallen leaves. She was searching for recyclables in the pre-dawn hours, when the streets were relatively empty and the likelihood of harassment was lower. Her father Peter was checking dumpsters behind restaurants a few blocks away. They'd learned long ago to split up during these morning searches to cover more ground. The rising sun had just begun to paint the glass and steel towers in shades of gold when something caught Diana's eye. At first it looked like just another piece of plastic litter, but as she bent to pick it up, her heart nearly stopped. There, lying face up on the rain-dampened sidewalk, was a black credit card that seemed to absorb what little light touched it. The name Aaron Warren was embossed in gleaming letters across its surface. Even among the homeless community, the Warren name carried weight. Aaron Warren owned half the buildings in this part of town, including several that had once provided affordable housing before being converted into luxury condominiums. Diana had heard stories about his unlimited credit line, how he could buy entire buildings with a single swipe of his card. The piece of plastic in her hands probably had more spending power than she'd seen in several lifetimes. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Diana's empty stomach cramped with hunger. She and her father hadn't eaten since sharing a half sandwich the previous afternoon. Images flashed through her mind: a hot meal, new shoes to replace her worn-out ones, maybe even a night in a real bed. The temptation was almost physical, like a weight pressing down on her chest. But then she heard her father's voice in her head, clear as if he were standing beside her. "Our integrity is all we truly own." It was something he'd told her countless times over the years, especially during their hardest moments. She remembered the night they'd found $5 on the street and had walked 3 miles in the rain to turn it in at the nearest police station. The desk sergeant had laughed at them, but Peter had stood tall, teaching Diana through his actions that dignity wasn't measured by other people's reactions. With trembling fingers, Diana slipped the credit card into the pocket of her worn jacket. The weight of it seemed disproportionate to its size, as if it carried not just monetary value but moral significance as well. She knew what she had to do, even though the path wouldn't be easy. Finding her father took longer than usual that morning. When she finally located him, he was helping an elderly homeless woman named Ruth sort through her possessions after they'd been scattered by some teenagers. It was so typical of him, even in their own desperate situation, he always found ways to help others. "Dad," Diana called out, her voice quavering with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Peter looked up, immediately alert to the unusual tone in his daughter's voice. He excused himself from Ruth and walked over, his brow furrowed with concern. Diana pulled him into a quiet doorway away from curious eyes. With careful movements, she withdrew the credit card from her pocket. Peter's eyes widened as he read the name, understanding immediately the magnitude of what his daughter had found. "It was just lying there on the sidewalk," Diana explained quickly, reading the unspoken question in her father's eyes. "I didn't. I thought about it, but I knew we had to return it." Peter's face softened with pride, and he pulled his daughter into a tight embrace. Diana could feel him trembling slightly, and she realized he was fighting back tears. This wasn't just about a credit card, it was about everything they'd endured together, every lesson about right and wrong, every sacrifice they'd made to maintain their dignity in a world that often seemed designed to strip it away. "You've done the right thing," Peter said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "Now we just have to figure out how to return it." They both knew this wouldn't be simple. People like them couldn't just walk into the Warren building and ask to see one of the most powerful men in New York. But as they stood there in the growing morning light, father and daughter drew strength from each other's presence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, secure in the knowledge that their moral compass pointed true. The Golden Crown Hotel stood like a glittering fortress in the heart of Manhattan, its marble facade and gleaming revolving doors a world away from Diana and Peter's daily existence. They had spent hours researching, learning that Aaron Warren would be hosting a charity gala there that evening, an event ironically focused on urban development and community improvement. After washing up as best they could in a public bathroom and straightening their worn but clean clothes, they approached the hotel's entrance. The doorman's expression shifted from professional courtesy to barely concealed disdain as they drew closer. Peter squared his shoulders, summoning the dignity that had once commanded respect in university lecture halls. "Excuse me," he began politely, "we need to speak with Mr. Aaron Warren. We have something that belongs to him." The doorman's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Mr. Warren doesn't speak with ... people like you. There's a service entrance around back if you're looking for work." Before Peter could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Nathan Warren was stepping out of a sleek black Mercedes, surrounded by an entourage of assistants and security personnel. Diana recognized him from news photographs, the golden boy of Manhattan's elite, known as much for his partying as his business acumen. "Mr. Warren," Peter called out, taking a step forward. Immediately, 2 security guards moved to block his path. "Please, we found your father's credit card. We just want to return it." Nathan turned, his expression a mixture of annoyance and amusement. He walked over, designer shoes clicking against the marble steps. "Let me get this straight," he said, looking them up and down with undisguised contempt. "You expect me to believe that you found my father's credit card and didn't use it?" Diana stepped forward, pulling the black card from her pocket. "We didn't use it. You can check. We just want to do the right thing." A small crowd had gathered, attracted by the confrontation. Nathan took the card, examining it with exaggerated skepticism. "Right," he drawled. "And I suppose you want a reward. Is that what this is about?" "No," Peter said firmly. "We don't want anything. The card belongs to your father and we're returning it. That's all." Nathan's laugh was cold. "Security, escort these people off the property. And make sure they don't come back." He turned to the gathering crowd of well-dressed onlookers. "Can you believe this? They probably tried to use it, got declined, and now they're trying to play Good Samaritan." The security guards moved forward, roughly grabbing Peter's arm. Diana tried to intervene, but was pushed back. "Don't touch my father," she cried out, her voice echoing off the hotel's marble walls. "Your father?" Nathan sneered. "Is that what you call your partner in crime? Check their IDs," he ordered the guards. "We should report them for attempted credit card theft." Peter stood tall, despite the guard's grip on his arm. "We have done nothing wrong. Check the card's history. We found it this morning and brought it straight here." "Get them out of here," Nathan commanded, already turning away. "And make sure they understand what happens to people who try to scam the Warren family." As they were being led away, Diana caught sight of an older man watching from an upper window. Aaron Warren himself, though she didn't know it at the time. His expression was unreadable, but he continued watching until they disappeared from view. On the sidewalk outside, Peter wrapped a protective arm around Diana's trembling shoulders. The humiliation burned, but something else hurt even more: the casual cruelty with which they'd been dismissed, the assumption of guilt based solely on their appearance. "I'm sorry, Dad," Diana whispered, fighting back tears. "Maybe we should have just turned it in at a bank or something." Peter kissed the top of her head gently. "No, sweetheart, we did the right thing. Their reaction speaks to their character, not ours." Unknown to them, their actions that day had set in motion a chain of events that would shake the Warren Empire to its core. For watching from the shadows was a journalist who had witnessed everything, including Nathan's arrogant dismissal of their honest act. And upstairs, Aaron Warren was already making a phone call that would change his son's life forever. "He needs to learn," Aaron said into the phone, his voice hard with disappointment, "and I know exactly how to teach him." 24 hours on the streets. No money, no phone, no credit cards. Just the clothes on your back. Aaron Warren's voice rang through his private office as Nathan stared at him in disbelief. The setting sun cast long shadows across the expensive furniture, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside. "You can't be serious," Nathan protested, his perfectly tailored suit suddenly feeling too tight. "I have meetings tomorrow, appointments, responsibilities." "All of which can wait," Aaron cut in sharply. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline he'd helped shape. "What I witnessed today was a disgrace. That girl and her father showed more integrity returning my credit card than you've shown in your entire privileged life." Nathan's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. They were obviously trying to scam us. Enough. Aaron's fist came down hard on his mahogany desk. "I've checked the card's history. Not a single attempted transaction. They found it this morning and brought it straight to us, despite being hungry and homeless. And you—" He paused, his disappointment palpable. "You humiliated them for their honesty." With methodical movements, Aaron held out his hand. "Your phone, wallet, and keys. Now." "Dad, please." "Now, Nathan. And one more thing, during these 24 hours I want you to find them. Find that girl and her father. Listen to their story, really listen. Maybe then you'll understand what real character looks like." Reluctantly, Nathan surrendered his possessions. As security escorted him out of the building, the reality of his situation began to sink in. The streets looked different already, more threatening, less familiar. The evening crowds pushed past him, no longer parting respectfully as they usually did. His first hour was spent in denial, convinced he could charm his way into a hotel room or find some other way around his father's punishment. But his famous name meant nothing without the wealth to back it up. Door after door closed in his face, each rejection a stinging reminder of how he'd treated Diana and Peter. By midnight, hunger had become a constant companion. He found himself staring longingly through restaurant windows, understanding for the first time what it meant to be on the outside looking in. The temperature dropped sharply, and his designer suit offered little protection against the cold. In a dark irony, he ended up in the same park where many homeless people he'd previously ignored sought shelter. There he met Marcus, a veteran who'd lost everything after returning from war with PTSD. Marcus shared his blanket and taught Nathan the harsh realities of street survival, which doorways were safe to sleep in, which cops to avoid, where to find food when desperate. "First night's always the hardest," Marcus said kindly, offering Nathan half a sandwich someone had given him. "But it's not the cold or hunger that gets to you most, it's the way people look right through you, like you're invisible." Nathan thought of all the times he'd done exactly that, walking past homeless people as if they didn't exist. The sandwich, which he would have dismissed as beneath him 24 hours ago, now tasted better than any 5-star meal he'd ever had. Through the long night he met others. Sarah, a former teacher who'd lost everything paying for her husband's cancer treatments. Young Mike, kicked out for being gay. Elderly Rose, evicted after her building was converted to luxury condos by a development company much like his father's. Each story chipped away at his preconceptions, each conversation revealing the complex humanity he'd previously refused to see. He learned about the informal support networks among the homeless community, how they looked out for each other despite having nothing themselves. Dawn found Nathan huddled in a doorway, exhausted and humbled. His perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his expensive suit stained and wrinkled. But the real transformation was happening inside. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be truly vulnerable, to be judged not by his wealth or status, but by his character alone. As he watched the city wake up, Nathan made a decision. He wouldn't just find Diana and Peter to fulfill his father's requirement, he would find them to make things right. Their act of honesty, which he had dismissed so cruelly, now seemed extraordinary in its simple dignity. The lessons of the streets had begun to teach him what his privileged upbringing never could. The transformation of Nathan Warren began not with a grand gesture, but with a simple cup of coffee. 1 week after his night on the streets, he stood outside St. Michael's Church at dawn, 2 paper cups in hand, waiting. His designer suit had been replaced by jeans and a plain sweater, his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. He'd spent days tracking down Diana and Peter's morning routine, learning they often came here to wash up before heading to the library. When they appeared, Peter instinctively moved to shield Diana, but Nathan raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Please," he said softly, "I just want to talk," and apologized. He held out the coffee cups, steam rising in the crisp morning air. "I know it doesn't make up for anything, but it's a start." The conversation that followed changed everything. Sitting on the church steps, Nathan listened as Peter and Diana shared their story, not just of finding the credit card, but of their daily struggles, their unwavering bond, and their determination to maintain their dignity despite everything. When Peter spoke of teaching Diana mathematics using discarded newspapers, or Diana described her makeshift reading classes for homeless children, Nathan felt something shift inside him. "I want to help," he announced suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just you, but everyone in your situation. I have resources, connections. We could create something meaningful: housing, education programs, job training." Diana's eyes lit up with hope, but Peter remained cautious. "We're not looking for charity," he said firmly. "Not charity," Nathan replied, "partnership. You understand these issues from the inside. I need your help to do this right." And so the Hearts Without Homes project was born, though its path forward would prove far from smooth. Nathan's first proposal to convert one of Warren Industries' empty buildings into affordable housing met fierce resistance from the board of directors. His father, while privately supportive, insisted Nathan fight these battles himself. "If you want social justice," son Aaron said, "you'll have to earn it." The wealthy residents near the proposed housing site organized protests, their arguments thinly veiling their prejudices. Property values will plummet, they claimed. Crime will increase. Nathan found himself facing the very attitudes he'd once embodied. But Diana and Peter proved invaluable allies. Peter's eloquence in community meetings, drawing from his mysterious past, helped sway public opinion. Diana's natural ability to connect with people, to share their stories in ways that touched hearts, began attracting media attention. Local businesses, inspired by their sincerity, started offering job training programs and employment opportunities. The project's first victory came unexpectedly. A prominent real estate developer, moved by Diana's passionate speech at a city council meeting, donated a building for renovation. Volunteers began showing up, contractors offering their services, lawyers working pro bono, medical professionals establishing a free clinic. Nathan worked tirelessly, often sleeping in his office, learning about zoning laws and building codes, fighting through bureaucratic red tape. He used his networking skills not for personal gain, but to build support for the cause. Each small success felt more meaningful than any business deal he'd ever closed. Yet the most profound changes were happening within Nathan himself. He started seeing the city through new eyes, understanding the human cost of urban development. His old friends drifted away, uncomfortable with his transformation, but he found more authentic relationships among the people he worked with. One evening, as he helped serve meals at the temporary shelter they'd established, Nathan caught his reflection in a window. The entitled young executive was gone, replaced by someone he barely recognized but finally respected. Diana approached, handing him another serving tray. "You know," she said with a smile, "when Dad and I found that credit card, we never imagined it would lead to all this." Nathan looked around at the room full of people being served with dignity, receiving medical care, getting help with job applications. "Neither did I," he replied. "Thank you for teaching me what real wealth looks like." Peter joined them, his face showing cautious pride in what they'd accomplished. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice carrying a hint of his former professor's authority. "There's so much more to be done." Nathan nodded, understanding that his redemption journey was far from complete, but with every life touched by the project, every small victory against systemic injustice, he felt closer to becoming the person he was meant to be. Diana's opportunity came unexpectedly during a Hearts Without Homes fundraising event. She was helping to coordinate volunteers when Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Dean of Admissions at Columbia University, overheard her explaining complex social issues to a group of donors. The clarity of her analysis and the eloquence of her presentation caught the Dean's attention. "Have you ever considered college?" Dr. Mitchell asked, drawing Diana aside. The question hit Diana like a physical force. Of course, she'd dreamed of college. She'd spent countless hours in the public library, devouring every book she could find, with her father tutoring her in everything from calculus to literature. But dreams were one thing, reality was another. I don't have a high school diploma," Diana admitted, "or transcripts," or she gestured vaguely at her second-hand clothes, the unspoken barriers hanging heavy in the air between them. Dr. Mitchell wasn't deterred. "We have a special admission program for exceptional cases. Would you be willing to take a series of placement tests?" The tests were arranged for the following week. Diana prepared in the library, Peter staying late into the night to help her study. When the day arrived, she sat in a sterile examination room, her worn pencil moving across papers that could change her future. Hours later, Dr. Mitchell's face told the story. Before she spoke, Diana hadn't just passed, she'd excelled. But the announcement of her acceptance sparked immediate controversy. An anonymous letter to the university newspaper questioned the fairness of admitting a homeless student over more qualified candidates. Social media erupted with debates about merit versus privilege. Some suggested her scores couldn't be legitimate, others claimed it was merely a publicity stunt. Diana's first day on campus was a study in contrasts. She arrived early, having walked 3 miles because she couldn't afford the subway fare. Her second-hand clothes and worn backpack marked her as different among students carrying designer bags and wearing expensive brands. In her first class, a group of students moved their chairs away when she sat nearby. The whispers followed her everywhere. "Did you hear? She's homeless. I heard she guilted her way in, probably just doing it for attention." Each comment stung, but Diana remembered her father's words, "Your worth isn't determined by their judgment." Things came to a head during a class discussion about economic inequality. A student named Brittany, whose father was a hedge fund manager, raised her hand. "I think some people just don't work hard enough," she announced, looking directly at Diana. "They expect handouts instead of earning their place." Diana felt all eyes turn to her. Her heart pounded, but her voice was steady when she responded. "Would you like to know what not working hard enough looks like?" she asked. "It's studying by streetlight because you can't afford electricity. It's walking miles to school because you can't afford transport. It's maintaining a 4.0 GP a while, helping other homeless children learn to read, while figuring out where your next meal will come from." The classroom fell silent. Even the professor seemed stunned by her quiet intensity. From that day, perceptions slowly began to shift. Students who had avoided her started asking to study together, discovering that Diana's life experiences brought unique insights to their discussions. Her academic performance silenced many critics. She earned top marks in every subject, her essays drawing on a depth of real-world understanding that her classmates couldn't match. Professor after professor noted her exceptional work, and soon even the most skeptical faculty members became supporters. Nathan, learning of the challenges she faced, offered to help with expenses, but both Diana and Peter declined. "We appreciated," Peter explained, "but Diana needs to do this her own way instead. They accepted only what she earned through a work-study program in the university library." One evening, as Diana was leaving the library after her shift, she found Brittany waiting outside. "I was wrong," Brittany said simply, "and I'm sorry. Would you be willing to help me understand? Really understand?" That conversation led to others, and slowly Diana became a bridge between two worlds. She started a student organization focused on educational equity, using her position to highlight systemic barriers and advocate for change. Her story began inspiring others, leading to the university establishing a scholarship program specifically for homeless students. Through it all, Peter's pride in his daughter shone like a beacon. Every evening, he would meet her after her last class, and they would share a simple dinner while discussing her day. Their circumstances hadn't changed yet, but education was opening doors that once seemed permanently closed. The truth about Peter's past surfaced in the most unexpected way. During a guest lecture at Columbia's economics department, Professor Emeritus James Hartford stopped mid-sentence, staring at Peter, who was waiting to pick up Diana after class. The color drained from the elderly professor's face, as if he'd seen a ghost. "Peter Mitchell," he called out, his voice trembling. "My God, it really is you." The buzz of student conversations died instantly. Diana turned to see her father frozen in the doorway, his usual composure cracking slightly. Professor Hartford approached him slowly, decades of history hanging in the air between them. "You were one of our brightest," Hartford said, addressing the stunned classroom. "Youngest tenured professor in the department's history. Your work on economic inequality was groundbreaking, until..." He trailed off, uncertainty crossing his face. The story emerged piece by piece over the following days. 10 years ago, Professor Peter Mitchell had been at the height of his career at Princeton University. His research on predatory corporate practices and their impact on low-income communities had attracted national attention. He was about to publish a damning report that would have exposed several major corporations, including Warren Industries. "Your research threatened powerful interests," Hartford explained during a private meeting with Peter and Diana. "When they couldn't buy your silence, they destroyed your credibility." Diana learned how false accusations of academic fraud had been fabricated, evidence planted, witnesses bribed. Peter had lost everything: his reputation, his career, his home. The academic community had turned its back on him, few willing to risk their own positions to defend him. "Why didn't you tell me?" Diana asked her father that evening, her voice soft with understanding rather than accusation. Peter's eyes were distant. "I wanted you to form your own judgments about the world, not be burdened by my past. And perhaps I was ashamed, not of standing up for the truth, but of failing to protect us from the consequences. The revelation sent shockwaves through the university. Students began digging up Peter's old papers, finding eerily accurate predictions about the growing wealth gap and the housing crisis. Young academics started questioning the circumstances of his dismissal, discovering irregularities in the investigation that had condemned him. Nathan, upon learning the truth, was devastated. "My father's company," he realized aloud, his voice hollow. "We were part of what happened to you." But Peter's response surprised them all. "What happened to me led me to Diana," he said quietly. "It taught me what truly matters. Yes, I lost my career, but I gained something far more precious, the chance to raise a daughter who knows the difference between wealth and worth." Support began pouring in from unexpected quarters. Former colleagues who had remained silent a decade ago now stepped forward with evidence backing Peter's original research. Journalists started investigating the conspiracy that had brought him down. Several whistleblowers from the companies involved came forward with corroborating documents. The university's president, recognizing both a moral obligation and a potential PR disaster, offered Peter a position as a distinguished visiting professor. But Peter's response caught everyone off guard. "I'll accept," he said, "on one condition. The university must establish a center for ethical economics, focusing on corporate accountability and economic justice. And I want all research to be freely accessible to the public, no more hiding truth behind paywalls or academic jargon." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The homeless man they had looked down on was now dictating terms to one of the world's most prestigious institutions. But Peter's quiet dignity and unwavering principles had earned him something money couldn't buy: respect. Diana watched these developments with mixed emotions. Pride in her father's resilience warred with anger at the injustice he'd suffered, but mostly she felt a deepening understanding of the lessons he'd taught her throughout their years on the streets. Their poverty had been imposed, but their integrity had been a choice, one they made every single day. As father and daughter walked home that evening to their temporary shelter, Peter pointed out the stars barely visible through the city's light pollution. "See how they shine anyway," he said softly. "Truth is like that, Diana. They can try to obscure it, but it never stops shining." But the backlash against hearts without homes began subtly at first. Anonymous complaints filed with city inspectors, mysterious delays in permit approvals, small but persistent obstacles that Nathan recognized as tactics his father's company had often used against competitors. But as the project gained momentum, the opposition became more overt and aggressive. The breaking point came when the program announced plans to convert an abandoned warehouse in an upscale neighborhood into a mixed-use facility offering transitional housing and job training. The neighborhood association immediately launched a sophisticated PR campaign, cloaking their prejudices in concerns about neighborhood character and property values. "We're not against helping the homeless," Karen Whitmore, the association's president, told local news cameras with practiced sincerity. "We just don't think this location is appropriate." Behind the scenes, her group hired high-powered lawyers and lobbied city officials to block the project. They circulated photos of homeless encampments, suggesting the facility would bring crime and disorder to their manicured streets. Nathan found himself fighting battles on multiple fronts. Corporate donors began quietly withdrawing their support, citing revised priorities. Banks that had eagerly offered financing suddenly discovered concerns about project viability. Even some of his father's oldest business associates started distancing themselves, sensing which way the wind was blowing. The media coverage turned increasingly hostile. The New York Standard, owned by one of the city's most powerful real estate developers, ran a series of investigative articles questioning the project's financial management. They dug into Nathan's past, portraying his transformation as a rebellious rich kid's phase, suggesting he was naive at best, fraudulent at worst. Trust fund heirs homeless crusade charity, or Vanity Project, one headline blared. The article carefully implied that Peter's academic scandal somehow tainted the entire initiative, while questioning Diana's Columbia admission as potential favoritism. It was character assassination dressed as journalism, and it was working. But the real threat emerged from an unexpected direction. A newly formed Citizens for Responsible Development began filing lawsuit after lawsuit against the project. Their legal documents were sophisticated, their strategies precise, suggesting backing from powerful interests. They targeted everything from environmental impact studies to zoning regulations, dragging each proposal into lengthy and expensive legal battles. Diana discovered the truth while researching the group's incorporation papers for a school project. The organization's funding could be traced through a maze of shell companies back to several major real estate developers, including Warren Industries. When she showed Nathan the evidence, his face went pale. My father's playing both sides, he realized. Publicly supporting us while secretly trying to shut us down. The betrayal cut deep, but it also steeled his resolve. The project's supporters fought back. Peter organized community forums where homeless individuals could share their stories directly with neighbors, breaking down stereotypes and building understanding. Diana's student organization at Columbia staged peaceful demonstrations, attracting media attention to the opposition's tactics. Local religious leaders began speaking out in favor of the project, framing it as a moral imperative. But Nathan learned to fight fire with fire. He hired his own PR team, but instead of spinning narratives, they focused on transparency, publishing detailed financial reports, sharing success stories, and inviting public inspection of every aspect of the operation. When the opposition spread fear, they responded with facts. When critics predicted disaster, they showed evidence of similar successful projects in other cities. The warehouse project became a symbol of the larger battle for the soul of the city. Each side recognized it as a test case that would set precedents for future initiatives. The wealthy opponents saw it as a threat to their privileged enclaves, while advocates viewed it as a chance to prove that integrated communities could thrive. Through it all, the project's core team grew closer. Late nights spent strategizing turned into deep conversations about justice, privilege, and change. Nathan's business acumen, combined with Peter's academic insights and Diana's passionate advocacy, created a powerful force for transformation. They were no longer just running a program, they were building a movement. One evening, after a particularly brutal day of legal battles and media attacks, Nathan found Diana and Peter still working in the project office. Despite the challenges, they were helping a newly homeless family navigate the shelter system, their commitment unwavering. The sight reminded him why they had started this fight. "They think they can wear us down," he said, joining them at the table. "They don't understand that this isn't just a project for us anymore. It's a revolution in how we see each other, how we build community." Peter looked up from the paperwork, his eyes tired but determined. "Revolutions aren't won overnight, Nathan. They're won in small victories, in changed minds and opened hearts. Every person we help is a victory they can't take away." Diana added, "And every obstacle they put in our way just proves." As the battle for hearts without homes intensified, unexpected bonds began forming between the most unlikely people. The growing tension with Aaron Warren cast a shadow over the project, but it also catalyzed deeper connections among those fighting for change. Nathan, Diana, and Peter found themselves at the center of an expanding web of relationships that would ultimately reshape their understanding of family and community. Nathan and Diana's relationship evolved in subtle ways. Their initial antagonism had given way to mutual respect, then genuine friendship. They spent long hours working together, their different perspectives complementing each other perfectly. Diana's street-level understanding balanced Nathan's corporate expertise, while her unwavering optimism helped sustain his resolve during the toughest battles. During one late-night strategy session, Diana caught Nathan staring at old family photos on his phone. "Do you miss it?" she asked softly. "The old life?" "Not the life," he replied, after a thoughtful pause. "But sometimes I miss when things were simpler with my father. Before I understood the cost of our wealth, The dynamic between Peter and Aaron Warren grew increasingly complex. Despite being adversaries on paper, they kept finding themselves drawn into long conversations whenever they encountered each other at public events. There was something familiar in their interactions, an inexplicable sense of déjà vu that neither could quite explain. At a city council meeting, Aaron approached Peter during a break. "Your economic theories," he said abruptly, "about corporate responsibility and sustainable development. They were right, weren't they? That's why they had to discredit you." Peter studied him carefully. "You knew about that." "I was part of it," Aaron admitted, his usual confidence faltering. "I just didn't know it was you until recently. Something about you seems familiar." The project began attracting support from unexpected quarters. Former students of Professor Mitchell emerged from the woodwork, now in positions of influence across various industries. They remembered his integrity and brilliance, and many felt guilty about staying silent during his downfall. Their support brought not just resources but legitimacy to the cause. Local business owners who had initially opposed the project started changing their minds after actually meeting the people it helped. Sarah Chen, who owned a bakery near the proposed warehouse site, became one of their strongest advocates after hiring several program participants. "These aren't just statistics," she told the neighborhood association. "They're our neighbors, and they deserve a chance." The most profound evolution, however, was in the relationship between Peter and Diana. As their circumstances improved and new opportunities emerged, their bond deepened in unexpected ways. Diana's success at Columbia and her growing confidence didn't distance her from her father, as some might have expected. Instead, it added new dimensions to their relationship. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraising event, Diana found Peter sitting alone in their new small apartment, provided by the project. He was holding the worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird they'd carried through their years on the streets. "Sometimes I wonder," he said as she sat beside him, "if I did right by you, raising you on the streets after everything fell apart." Diana took his hand. "Dad, you taught me the difference between being poor and being broken. You showed me that integrity matters more than comfort, that helping others isn't just something you do when it's convenient. Everything I am, everything I'm becoming, is because of you." Meanwhile, Nathan's relationship with his father became increasingly strained. Aaron Warren's subtle sabotage of the project created a painful dilemma for Nathan. He found himself torn between filial duty and his growing conviction in the righteousness of their cause. During a heated argument in Aaron's office, Nathan finally confronted him. "Why are you fighting us? Really? These people need help, and we have the resources to make a difference." Aaron's response was unexpected, because you need to understand what you're really fighting for. If you can build this despite my opposition, then maybe you're ready for the truth about our family. The cryptic response left Nathan puzzled, but he had little time to dwell on it. The project was growing, evolving from a simple housing initiative into a movement for social change. Each relationship formed, each connection made, added another thread to the tapestry of community they were weaving. As Diana observed one evening, watching Nathan mediate a dispute between residents while Peter advised a group of student volunteers, "We're not just building homes anymore. We're building something bigger, a family of choice, a community of purpose." The transformation of hearts without homes from a local housing initiative into a comprehensive social movement happened gradually, then suddenly. What began as a single converted warehouse blossomed into a network of interconnected programs spanning education, employment, healthcare, and community development. Each new success brought fresh challenges, but also expanded their vision of what was possible. The education program, inspired by Diana's journey to Columbia, became a cornerstone of their work. They established partnerships with local community colleges and vocational schools, creating pathways for homeless individuals to access training and certification programs. Diana's story became a beacon of hope, proving that circumstances didn't have to define destiny. "Education isn't just about books," she told a group of teenage residents. It's about believing you have a future worth preparing for. Her words resonated particularly with Sarah, a 16-year-old girl who had been living in her car with her mother. Within months, Sarah went from struggling with basic reading to preparing for her GED, her transformation inspiring others to follow suit. The employment initiative expanded beyond simple job placement. They created a social enterprise hub where residents could develop business skills while earning income. A catering business staffed by former homeless individuals became renowned for its quality, breaking stereotypes with every successful event. A cleaning service, a small construction company, and a craft cooperative followed, each success building momentum. Healthcare access proved a particularly critical need. Nathan leveraged his connections to establish a full-service clinic within their main facility, staffed by volunteer medical professionals and medical students from Colombia. Regular health screenings, mental health services, and addiction treatment became integral parts of their support system. Peter's academic background proved invaluable as they developed metrics to track their impact. Their data showed not just success stories, but systematic evidence that their approach worked. When residents received comprehensive support, housing, education, healthcare, and employment opportunities, their rate of returning to homelessness dropped dramatically. The warehouse project, once so controversial, became a model for urban development. The mixed-use facility included not just transitional housing, but also a daycare center, job training facilities, and small business incubators. The neighborhood that had once opposed them now celebrated their presence, as property values actually increased due to the area's revitalization. Local businesses began actively seeking to hire their program graduates, discovering that these employees often brought exceptional dedication and resilience to their work. Mark Johnson, owner of a successful construction company, became one of their strongest advocates after hiring several participants. "These are some of the most determined, hard-working people I've ever met," he told the Chamber of Commerce. The project's success attracted attention from other cities. Delegations came to study their model, seeking to replicate their results. Nathan found himself traveling frequently, consulting with other communities looking to launch similar initiatives. Each new location adapted the program to local needs while maintaining the core principles of dignity, opportunity, and community. Their financial model evolved as well. While they still relied partly on donations, their social enterprises began generating significant revenue. They established a micro-lending program, helping residents start their own small businesses. But the repayment rate exceeded 95%, challenging conventional assumptions about financial responsibility among the homeless population. Community engagement deepened in unexpected ways. Regular dinners brought residents and neighbors together, breaking down barriers through shared meals and conversation. A community garden became a symbol of their approach, people from all walks of life working together to create something beautiful and sustainable. The arts played a surprising role in their expansion. A mural project, initially meant to beautify the warehouse exterior, evolved into a therapeutic program where residents could express their experiences through art. The resulting works became powerful tools for advocacy, touring galleries and challenging perceptions about homelessness. Throughout the expansion, they maintained their commitment to dignity and autonomy. Residents participated in decision-making processes, served on advisory boards, and helped shape new initiatives. This isn't about charity, Peter often reminded visitors. But it's about creating opportunities for people to rebuild their lives on their own terms. One evening, as Nathan, Diana, and Peter reviewed plans for their newest facility, they reflected on how far they'd come. The original warehouse was visible from their office window, its transformed facade now a landmark in the neighborhood. "Remember when people said it couldn't work?" Diana smiled, looking at the thriving community they'd built. "They said a lot of things couldn't work," Nathan replied, "but they didn't understand what becomes possible when you combine resources with respect, opportunity with dignity." Peter nodded, adding, "And when you recognize that everyone has something to contribute, everyone has value." Their expansion wasn't just about growing bigger, it was about growing deeper, creating lasting change in how communities viewed and addressed homelessness. Each new program, each success story, added another piece to their vision of a more just and inclusive society. The crisis began on an ordinary Tuesday morning when Nathan arrived at the project headquarters to find an eviction notice taped to the door. The document, filled with legal jargon, essentially declared that the warehouse property had been sold to a new owner who planned immediate redevelopment. They had 30 days to vacate. Inside, chaos reigned. Residents gathered in frightened clusters, whispering about returning to the streets. Staff members hurried between offices, making frantic phone calls. Diana stood at the center of it all, trying to maintain calm while Peter studied the legal documents with a grim expression. "This isn't a coincidence," Peter said quietly when Nathan joined them. "Look at the purchasing company Sterling Development Group. It's a shell corporation, but the paperwork traces back to Warren Industries." Nathan felt the blood drain from his face. His father had finally made his move, using his corporate might to strike at the heart of their project. The timing was devastating. They had just expanded their programs, stretching their resources thin. The winter months were approaching, making the prospect of displacement even more dangerous for their residents. The media descended like vultures. "Homeless project faces homelessness" became the ironic headline of choice. Critics who had been waiting for them to fail emerged from the woodwork, citing the crisis as proof that their model was unsustainable. The New York Standard ran a particularly vicious piece, suggesting financial mismanagement and hinting at potential fraud. Their legal team worked around the clock seeking options, but the sale appeared ironclad. The original property owner had died, and his heirs had quietly sold to Sterling Development Group for well above market value. Every alternative property they investigated mysteriously became unavailable as soon as they expressed interest. "They're blocking us at every turn," Nathan exploded during an emergency board meeting. "Every building, every potential location, someone gets there first or the owner suddenly changes their mind. It's like fighting a ghost." The crisis deepened when their major donors began receiving anonymous dossiers containing manipulated financial records that suggested impropriety. Within days, several foundations suspended their funding pending investigation. Bank loans were suddenly called in for review. Even their most stalwart supporters started expressing concerns. Diana discovered the true extent of the conspiracy while working late one night. A mistakenly copied email revealed a coordinated campaign orchestrated by a coalition of real estate developers, including Warren Industries. They weren't just trying to evict them, they were attempting to destroy the entire concept of integrated community development that Hearts Without Homes represented. They're afraid, Peter realized, not just of us, but of what we represent. We're proving that another way is possible, and that threatens their entire business model. The pressure began taking its toll. Staff members, worried about job security, started updating their resumes. Some residents, fearing another descent into homelessness, left to seek alternatives. The atmosphere of hope that had defined their community was giving way to fear and uncertainty. Nathan worked himself to exhaustion, barely sleeping as he sought solutions. Diana organized resident meetings, trying to keep spirits up while secretly terrified of failing those who had trusted them. Peter spent hours on the phone with lawyers and city officials, searching for any legal recourse. The breaking point came during a community meeting to discuss the crisis. As Nathan tried to reassure the gathered residents, an elderly woman named Grace stood up. She had been one of their first success stories, moving from the streets to her own small apartment through their program. "You gave me back my dignity," she said, her voice trembling. "You showed me I still had value. Even if they take this building, they can't take that away. We'll find a way forward together." Her words sparked something in the room. Other residents stood, sharing similar sentiments. The atmosphere shifted from despair to determination. What had started as a crisis meeting transformed into a strategy session with residents and staff brainstorming solutions together. That evening, as Nathan, Diana, and Peter sat in the quiet office reviewing their options, Diana noticed something in the original property documents. A clause about maintaining the property's community benefit status might provide a legal foothold. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "We're not just fighting for a building," Nathan said, his voice firm despite his exhaustion. "We're fighting for everything we believe in, that everyone deserves a chance, that community matters, that profit shouldn't always trump people." Peter nodded, adding, "And we're not fighting alone anymore. Every person in this building, every life we've touched, they're all part of this now." Diana looked out at the city lights, remembering the nights she'd spent on these same streets. "Then let's show them what community really means," she said quietly. "Let's show them what we can do when we stand together." The accident happened on a rainy Wednesday evening, just as the crisis with the warehouse was reaching its peak. Diana had stayed late at the project office, working on legal appeals, when she heard screaming from the street below. Without hesitation, she ran to the window and saw 6-year-old Tommy, one of their residents' children, chasing his ball into oncoming traffic. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Diana bolted down the stairs and into the street. The screech of brakes pierced the air as she pushed Tommy clear of the oncoming car. She wasn't quite fast enough to save herself. The impact sent her flying, her body crumpling against the wet pavement as horrified onlookers screamed for help. The ambulance took 20 minutes to arrive, an eternity for Peter, who cradled his daughter's unconscious form in the rain, begging her to hold on. Nathan, alerted by frantic phone calls, arrived just as they were loading Diana into the ambulance. The sight of her pale face, streaked with blood, would haunt him for months to come. At Manhattan General Hospital, they hit their first barrier. "We need insurance information," the intake nurse said coldly, barely looking up from her computer. Peter's hands shook as he explained their situation. Minutes ticked by as administrators debated what to do with an uninsured homeless patient. "This is Diana Mitchell," Nathan finally exploded, his voice carrying through the emergency room. "She's a Columbia University student who just saved a child's life. Treat her now, or I'll have every news outlet in the city here within the hour." The threat worked, but the discrimination continued in subtle ways. Diana was placed in a hallway instead of a room. Doctors seemed in no hurry to check on her. Basic pain medication was temporarily unavailable. Peter watched helplessly as his daughter suffered, his professor's eloquence reduced to quiet pleading. Word of the accident spread quickly through their community. The hospital's waiting room filled with hearts without homes, residents, staff, and supporters. Tommy's mother sobbed with guilt, while the boy clutched a handmade get well card. Columbia students organized a vigil outside, their candles reflecting off the rain's slicked windows. The diagnosis, when it finally came, was devastating: severe internal injuries, a fractured pelvis, and potential spinal damage. The surgery she needed was expensive, and the hospital demanded payment up front. "We're not a charity," the administrator said, his tone suggesting exactly what he thought of their situation. Peter offered to sell his kidney, a suggestion that brought tears to Nathan's eyes. The residents began pooling their meager savings, offering everything they had. Former homeless individuals who had gotten back on their feet through their program started a crowdfunding campaign. The Columbia student body organized an emergency fundraiser. But it was Grace, the elderly resident who had spoken up during the crisis meeting, who changed everything. She went to the media with her story of how Diana had helped her off the streets, taught her to read, and given her back her dignity. Other residents followed, sharing their stories of Diana's impact on their lives. The public response was overwhelming. Local news channels picked up the story "Homeless Hero Saves Child," denied care. Social media exploded with outrage over the hospital's treatment of Diana. "Justice for Diana" started trending. Suddenly, the same hospital administrators who had been so dismissive were falling over themselves to help. Nathan watched this outpouring of support with a mixture of joy and shame. This is what we've been fighting for, he realized aloud. Not just housing or programs, but recognition of basic human dignity. The right to be seen as people, not problems. Diana's surgery lasted 6 hours. During the long wait, Peter never moved from his plastic waiting room chair, his clothes still damp from the rain. The community he and Diana had helped build surrounded him, offering coffee, sandwiches, and quiet support. Former students brought blankets and supplies. Local business owners sent food for the vigil participants. When the surgeon finally emerged, his news was cautiously optimistic. Diana would recover, though the rehabilitation process would be long and challenging. The room erupted in tears and prayers of relief. Peter collapsed into Nathan's arms, the strain of the past hours finally overwhelming him. But it was Tommy who provided the moment of grace. The little boy approached Peter, clutching his card. "Is Diana going to be okay?" he asked in a small voice. "She saved me like an angel." Peter knelt down to Tommy's level, gathering the child into a gentle hug. "Yes, she's going to be okay. And you know what? She did exactly what she's always done, help someone who needed it, no matter the cost." As dawn broke over the city, Diana's hospital room had transformed into a testament to community. The walls were covered with cards and artwork from residents. Students took turns reading to her from her favorite books. Even some of the hospital staff, moved by the outpouring of love, began treating her with newfound respect. Nathan's confrontation with his father came at the lowest point of the crisis. With Diana in the hospital, the eviction deadline looming, and their funding frozen, he finally understood that he had to make a definitive choice. He found Aaron Warren in his penthouse office, Manhattan's lights twinkling below like fallen stars. "I know what you did," Nathan said without preamble, placing a folder on his father's desk. "The shell company, the coordinated attacks on our funding, the manufactured financial records. I have proof of all of it." Aaron didn't even glance at the folder. "And what do you plan to do with this information?" His voice was calm, almost curious. "Release it to the media? Sue me? Remember who taught you everything you know about corporate warfare?" "Why?" Nathan demanded, his voice cracking. "Why go to such lengths to destroy something that's helping people? We're not even competing with your business interests anymore. What are you really afraid of?" Aaron stood slowly, walking to the window. "You think this is about business? This is about legacy, Nathan. About understanding the true cost of power. Everything I've built, everything I've sacrificed to create this empire, I needed to know if you were strong enough to protect it." "Protect it?" Nathan laughed bitterly. "I'll hide behind it. I've seen real strength these past months. Dad, I've seen people with nothing share what little they have. I've watched Diana risk her life to save a child. I've seen Peter maintain his dignity through everything you threw at him. That's strength. What we do, what we've always done, that's just power." A flash of something crossed Aaron's face at the mention of Peter's name. "You don't understand the choices I've had to make," he said quietly. "The compromises required to build something lasting." "No, I understand perfectly now," Nathan replied, "and I'm making my own choice. Either you stop this campaign against Hearts Without Homes, or I'll release everything, including some interesting documents I found about a certain orphanage 30 years ago." Aaron's head snapped up, genuine shock replacing his usual controlled expression. "How did you?" "I learned from the best, remember? About following paper trails, finding buried secrets. Like the records of twin boys separated at birth, one adopted by the wealthy Warren family, the other lost to the system. Peter's not just Diana's father, is he? He's your brother." The silence that followed was deafening. Aaron sank into his chair, suddenly looking older than Nathan had ever seen him. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Not until I saw him at the hotel that day. Something about him seemed so familiar." "You recognized him?" Nathan pressed. "And instead of reaching out, you tried to destroy him. Again. I was protecting our family. No, Nathan cut him off. You were protecting yourself, your image, your control. Well, here's your choice, Dad. End this vendetta now. Release the property, restore our funding, make this right, or I swear I'll bring it all down the company, the reputation, everything. Aaron studied his son with new eyes. You'd sacrifice your inheritance? Your future? I'm not sacrificing anything, Nathan replied firmly. I'm choosing what kind of person I want to be, what kind of legacy I want to build. The question is, what are you choosing? The tension stretched between them, years of unspoken expectations and buried truths rising to the surface. Finally, Aaron reached for his phone. Get me legal, he said quietly, and clear my schedule for tomorrow. It's time to fix some things. As Nathan turned to leave, his father called after him. Nathan, what you said about strength. Perhaps you understand more than I thought. Outside in the cool night air, Nathan felt lighter than he had in months. His phone buzzed with a text from Peter. Diana was awake and asking for him. As he headed toward the hospital, he realized that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in what you're willing to fight for, but in what you're willing to give up. The city stretched around him, a maze of light and shadow, privilege and poverty, all the stark contrasts that had once seemed so natural to him, now revealing themselves as choices that could be unmade, remade, transformed by courage and compassion. The woman appeared at the hospital 3 days after Diana's accident, clutching a newspaper with the story of the homeless hero on its front page. She was elegantly dressed, her silver-streaked dark hair perfectly styled, but her hands trembled as she approached the nurse's station, asking for Diana Mitchell's room. Peter saw her first, emerging from Diana's room to get coffee. He stopped dead in his tracks, the empty coffee cup slipping from his fingers and clattering on the linoleum floor. Elizabeth, he whispered, his face draining of color. Elizabeth Bennet, once his wife and Diana's mother, stood before him looking like a ghost from his past. Hello, Peter, she said softly. I've been searching for you both for so long. When I saw the article. Her voice trailed off as she glanced toward Diana's room. The reunion was complicated by Diana's fragile condition. Still recovering from surgery, she wasn't prepared for the emotional shock of meeting the mother she'd believed abandoned her. When Elizabeth entered the room, Diana's heart monitor began beeping rapidly. I never wanted to leave you, Elizabeth began, tears streaming down her face. But I was sick fighting addiction, depression, things I couldn't control. I convinced myself you'd be better off without me. By the time I got clean and came looking for you, you'd both disappeared. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Elizabeth had spent years searching for her family. While they lived on the streets she'd probably driven past countless times. She was now a successful interior designer, her recovery having led to a complete life transformation. But fate had a cruel twist in store. As Elizabeth reached for Diana's hand, she winced slightly, touching her side. The gesture wasn't lost on Peter, who had seen too many hospital rooms lately not to recognize the signs. How long? He asked quietly. Elizabeth's smile was sad. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. Finding you both. It's a gift I didn't dare hope for. But also a chance to make things right, or at least try to. Diana, who had remained silent, finally spoke. All those years on the street, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Did you ever think about us? Wonder if we were okay? Every single day, Elizabeth replied. I kept a journal for you, writing letters I thought I'd never get to give you. They're all about how proud I am of the woman you become, even though I had no right to that pride. The monitor's steady beeping filled the silence that followed. 3 people bound by blood and separated by circumstance, trying to navigate a reunion shadowed by impending loss. Peter moved to stand beside Diana's bed, his protective instinct still strong after all these years. Elizabeth pulled out a worn notebook from her designer bag. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness," she said. "But maybe you'd be willing to read these, to understand? And perhaps, for whatever time I have left, we could try to know each other." Diana looked at her father, seeking guidance as she had so many times before. Peter's eyes were filled with tears as he nodded slightly. Some wounds, he knew, could only heal through forgiveness, a lesson their years on the street had taught them well. The truth about the Warren family's past exploded into public view during a routine board meeting at Warren Industries. Nathan stood before the assembled directors, his father watching with an unreadable expression as he laid out documented evidence of decades of corporate malfeasance. 10 years ago? Nathan began, his voice steady. "This company orchestrated the destruction of Professor Peter Mitchell's career because his research threatened our profit margins. We didn't just silence him, we systematically erased his life's work, drove him into poverty, and forced him onto the streets with his young daughter." The boardroom erupted in murmurs as Nathan continued, projecting documents onto the screen behind him. But that wasn't the first time Warren Industries sacrificed ethics for profit. 30 years ago, Aaron Warren made another choice, one that would haunt two families for generations. Aaron's face had gone pale as Nathan revealed the orphanage records. Twin boys separated at birth. One adopted into wealth and privilege, the other left to the foster system. My father and Peter Mitchell brothers, torn apart by the very system of inequality that our company has perpetuated. The media frenzy that followed was unprecedented. Warren Empire built on family betrayal screamed the headlines. Journalists dug deeper, uncovering more evidence of corporate misconduct. Former employees came forward with their own stories of ethical breaches and cover-ups. The revelation of Aaron and Peter's relationship captured the public's imagination. It was like a modern-day tale of two cities, identical twins, whose lives had taken radically different paths, their reunion forced by circumstances neither could have predicted. For Nathan, exposing these truths meant sacrificing his inheritance and possibly his relationship with his father. But watching Peter and Aaron face each other across a conference table, seeing the mirror image of their features aged differently by privilege and hardship, he knew he'd made the right choice. "I thought I was protecting our legacy," Aaron finally admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "But I was just perpetuating a cycle of harm. The real legacy was right in front of me in the brother I abandoned, in the work you and Diana are doing to help others." The board of directors, facing intense public pressure and shareholder outrage, voted to establish a substantial restitution fund for those harmed by the company's past actions. Peter would be reinstated as a respected economist, his research finally vindicated. But the personal wounds would take longer to heal. Journalists camped outside the hospital where Diana was recovering, hoping to catch glimpses of the newly reunited family members. The story had everything: wealth, poverty, twins separated at birth, corporate intrigue, and redemption. But for those living it, the reality was far more complex than any headline could capture. As the dust began to settle, Nathan found himself caught between two worlds: the corporate empire he'd been raised to inherit, and the community-focused work that had given his life meaning. The choice, in the end, wasn't really a choice at all. The revelations about Warren Industries triggered an unexpected wave of backlash against Hearts Without Homes. Conservative media outlets painted the project as part of a revenge plot against the Warren family. Corporate donors, fearful of being associated with the scandal, began withdrawing support en masse. "It was never about revenge," Diana insisted during a community meeting, her voice still weak from her hospital bed where they'd set up a video link. "We were just trying to help people, but the narrative had already taken hold." Social media exploded with conspiracy theories, suggesting the entire project had been orchestrated to bring down Warren Industries. The residents felt the impact most directly. Local businesses that had previously supported their job training programs suddenly became hesitant. Landlords who had partnered with their housing initiatives started backing out. The warehouse project, despite Aaron's intervention, faced new opposition from city officials worried about political fallout. Peter found himself thrust unwillingly into the spotlight as Aaron Warren's long-lost twin. Every aspect of his past was scrutinized, his years of homelessness now viewed through a lens of family drama rather than systemic inequality. Some questioned whether he had known about his relationship to the Warrens all along, suggesting he had manipulated Nathan as part of a long-term plan. The project staff began receiving threats. Grace, their elderly resident who had spoken out during Diana's hospitalization, had her car vandalized. The children's after-school program had to be temporarily suspended after protesters started gathering outside. The sense of security they had worked so hard to build was crumbling. Nathan watched in horror as the community they'd built began to fracture under the pressure. "They're missing the point entirely," he told a gathering of residents. "This isn't about the Warrens or corporate politics. It's about the basic right to dignity and opportunity." The crisis came to a head when a group of influential real estate developers launched a coordinated campaign to discredit the project. They funded studies suggesting that property values had decreased in areas near hearts without homes facilities, despite evidence to the contrary. Local politicians, sensing shifting winds, began distancing themselves from the initiative. Even some of their own residents, scared by the uncertainty, began looking for alternatives. The atmosphere of hope and solidarity that had defined their community was giving way to fear and suspicion. The dream of creating a new model for addressing homelessness seemed to be slipping away. But in the darkness, unexpected lights began to shine. Former recipients of their program started speaking out, sharing stories of transformation and renewal. Local religious leaders organized interfaith support rallies. Columbia students launched a social media campaign highlighting the project's positive impact on the community. Tommy, the young boy Diana had saved, became an unlikely symbol of resistance. His mother's emotional speech about Diana's sacrifice went viral, reminding people of the real human stakes behind the political drama. "They say this project is about revenge," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But my son is alive because these people believe in helping others no matter the cost." The truth emerged in fragments, like pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. On a quiet evening in Diana's hospital room, Aaron Warren shared the full story with his newly discovered family, his voice heavy with decades of suppressed guilt. "Our parents died when we were 2, he began, addressing Peter. The orphanage couldn't find relatives willing to take twins. When the Warrens came looking to adopt, they only wanted 1 child. I was chosen simply because I was slightly healthier that day. You had a cold." Diana, propped up in her hospital bed, watched the identical men her father and uncle mirror each other's movements unconsciously. Both ran their hands through their grey-streaked hair, both leaned forward with the same intensity. The similarities were startling, yet their lives couldn't have been more different. "I started searching for you in my 20s, Aaron continued. But the records were sealed, and then the orphanage burned down. When I finally got a lead, I discovered you'd become a prominent economist. I convinced myself it was better to leave you alone. You seemed successful, happy. Until your company destroyed my career," Peter said quietly. "Did you know it was me when you authorized that campaign against my research?" Aaron's face crumpled. "No, I never read the names on those reports. I just knew someone was threatening our development projects with statistics about displacement and poverty. When I finally saw you at the hotel that day with Diana, something felt familiar. But I buried the feeling. I'd become very good at burying feelings." Nathan sat silently, watching his father's carefully constructed world crumble. The mighty Aaron Warren, who had taught him that sentiment was weakness, was weeping openly now. "The irony," Peter mused, "is that my research was partly driven by my own experience in the foster system. I wanted to understand the economic forces that tear families apart. I never imagined I was studying my own brother's company." Elizabeth, Diana's mother, who had been listening quietly from her wheelchair, spoke up. So Diana isn't just the daughter of a former economics professor. She's a Warren by blood. All this time, while you were living on the streets, she was heir to one of the largest fortunes in New York. Diana shook her head. No, she said firmly. My inheritance isn't money or property. It's the lessons I learned from my father about dignity and integrity. It's the community we've built at Hearts Without Homes. That's worth more than any fortune. The room fell silent as her words sank in. Nathan reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. He understood now why he'd felt so drawn to her from the moment she'd tried to return his father's credit card. They were both products of the Warren legacy, but they'd chosen to redefine what that legacy meant. I want to make this right, Aaron said finally. Not just with Hearts Without Homes, but with all of it. Peter, your research needs to be republished, your reputation restored. Diana, everything I have is yours too, though I suspect you'll use it differently than I did. And Nathan. He turned to his son with pride in his eyes. You saw the truth before any of us. You chose a better path. Peter stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. You know what I remember most about the orphanage, he said suddenly. Not the day you left, but the nights before. We had a secret language, a way of tapping messages to each other through the wall between our beds. 3 taps meant I'm here for, meant don't be afraid. Aaron rose slowly and joined his brother at the window. After a moment's hesitation, he tapped his finger against the windowsill 3 times. Without turning, Peter tapped back 4 times. Decades of separation, of privilege and hardship, of choices made and paths not taken, all distilled into this simple childhood code. Diana watched her father and uncle, tears streaming down her face. Nathan held her hand tighter, understanding that this moment was both an ending and a beginning. The truth hadn't just been revealed, it had set them all free. The transformation of Warren Industries began with a press conference unlike any Wall Street had ever seen. Aaron Warren stood before a sea of reporters, flanked by his brother Peter, his son Nathan, and Diana joining via video link from her hospital room. The image of the identical twins, one a corporate titan, the other recently homeless, captured the nation's attention. Today, Warren Industries announces not just a change in policy, but a complete reimagining of corporate responsibility Aaron began. Our first act is the establishment of the Mitchell-Warren Foundation, with an initial endowment of $5 billion, dedicated to addressing homelessness and economic inequality. The stock market reacted with initial panic, but something unexpected happened. As details of the new initiative emerged, public support began to grow. Consumers, particularly younger generations, started preferentially choosing Warren-affiliated products and services. Other corporations, sensing a shift in public sentiment, began reaching out to partner with the foundation. Peter's academic research was republished with an unprecedented public apology from the academic institutions that had abandoned him. His theories about corporate responsibility and sustainable development, once considered radical, were now being taught in business schools across the country. He was offered his former position at Princeton, but chose instead to establish a new Department of Economic Justice at Columbia. The Foundation's first major project was the expansion of Hearts Without Homes nationwide. The warehouse that had started it all became a model for similar facilities across the country. But this time they had the full weight of Warren Industries behind them, legal teams to navigate zoning laws, construction crews to renovate buildings, corporate partnerships to provide job opportunities. We're not just giving people houses, Nathan explained during a TED Talk that would later go viral. We're rebuilding the social fabric that prevents homelessness in the first place. Every facility includes healthcare, education, job training, and most importantly, a sense of community. The corporate culture of Warren Industries underwent its own revolution. Aaron, with Peter's guidance, implemented sweeping changes: a living wage for all employees, affordable housing requirements in all development projects, profit-sharing programs for workers. The company's mission statement was rewritten to prioritize social impact alongside financial returns. Diana, Once she was well enough to travel, became the foundation's most effective ambassador. Her story from homelessness to Harvard Law School, where she'd been accepted with a full scholarship, resonated with audiences everywhere. But she never let people forget that her story shouldn't be exceptional. The only difference between me and thousands of others, she would say, is that I got lucky enough to have my story heard. Every person on the street has just as much potential, just as much right to opportunity. We just need to listen. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Some board members resigned in protest. Certain investors pulled out, uncomfortable with the new direction. But for every departure, there seemed to be 2 new allies ready to join their cause. Young entrepreneurs, inspired by the new model, began approaching Warren Industries with innovative ideas for social enterprise. Aaron found himself learning to lead in a completely different way. The ruthless corporate warrior gave way to someone more reflective, more concerned with legacy than quarterly profits. His relationship with Peter deepened as they worked together, each bringing their unique perspectives to the challenge of systemic change. 1 year after the press conference, Warren Industries hosted a different kind of shareholder meeting. Instead of just financial reports, they heard testimony from people whose lives had been transformed by their initiatives. Grace, now running a successful catering business through Hearts Without Homes, received a standing ovation for her speech about second chances. "We're not just changing lives," Aaron concluded that day, looking at his brother, son, and niece with pride. "We're changing what's possible. Proving that profit and purpose aren't opposing forces, they're most powerful when they work together." The business world was watching. What had started as one company's redemption story was evolving into a movement. Other corporations began launching their own social impact initiatives, some in partnership with the Mitchell-Warren Foundation. A new model of capitalism was emerging, one that recognized the true cost of inequality and the value of community. The true measure of their success became visible not in corporate boardrooms but on the streets themselves. 1 year after the Warren family revelations, the original Hearts Without Homes warehouse hosted a community celebration that spilled out onto the surrounding blocks. Streets once known for their emptiness and decay now buzzed with life and purpose. Former residents, now small business owners, had set up stalls showcasing their enterprises. Grace's catering service provided the food, while Tommy's mother, now a certified nursing assistant, helped staff the free health screening booth. The art therapy program had transformed building walls into stunning murals telling stories of transformation and hope. Diana, fully recovered and standing tall beside her father, watched children playing safely in what had once been abandoned lots. "Remember when people said this neighborhood was beyond saving?" she asked Nathan, who stood nearby greeting residents by name. They didn't understand that neighborhoods don't need saving, they need nurturing. Public opinion had shifted dramatically. The same media outlets that had once questioned their motives now highlighted their successes. Local politicians who had distanced themselves during the crisis were eager to be associated with the project. But more importantly, the community itself had become its own strongest advocate. When a similar initiative faced opposition in Brooklyn, residents from the original site organized peaceful demonstrations in support. They shared their stories, opened their doors to skeptics, and demonstrated the tangible benefits of integrated community development. The Brooklyn project was approved unanimously. The impact extended beyond housing. Their education programs had achieved remarkable success rates, with former homeless individuals now attending colleges or securing skilled employment. The health clinic had become a model for community-based healthcare, with medical students from Columbia regularly rotating through for training. Perhaps most significantly, the project had changed how people viewed homelessness itself. Through their advocacy and example, they'd shown that homelessness wasn't a personal failure but a systemic issue that required community-wide solutions. The US versus them mentality that had once dominated public discourse was giving way to a more nuanced understanding. During the celebration, Peter and Aaron stood together watching the crowds. The twin brothers, their paths having diverged so dramatically before reconnecting, now worked in perfect synchronization to expand their impact. "We've come full circle," Peter observed, "from being separated by this system to transforming it together." Elizabeth, though weakened by her illness, had become a passionate advocate for addiction recovery programs within the facilities. Her design expertise helped create spaces that promoted healing and dignity. "Every detail matters," she would say. "The color of a wall, the comfort of a chair, these things tell people they have value." Even the most hardened critics found it difficult to argue with their results. Crime rates in the area had dropped significantly. Property values had actually increased, but thanks to careful planning and legal protections, gentrification hadn't displaced existing residents. Instead, the neighborhood had become a model of genuine integration across social and economic lines. Nathan, who had once viewed the world exclusively through a profit lens, now saw success differently: real wealth. He told a group of business school students visiting the site isn't just about money, it's about creating value that lifts everyone up. It's about building communities where everyone has a chance to thrive. The celebration reached its peak as the sun began to set. Residents old and new gathered in the courtyard, sharing meals and stories. Children played alongside elderly residents, while former executives chatted easily with people they might once have crossed the street to avoid. The artificial barriers of class and status had dissolved in the face of genuine human connection. As darkness fell, the community gathered for an impromptu concert in the courtyard. A formerly homeless musician, now teaching at their arts program, led a band composed of residents and volunteers. The music filled the air with joy and possibility, a testament to the power of unity and shared purpose. The gardens atop the Warren Industries building provided a peaceful sanctuary for the most intimate family moment, Elizabeth's final days. Her hospital bed had been moved there at her request, allowing her to spend her remaining time surrounded by the greenery she had helped design, watching the city she had once fled now transformed by her family's work. Diana rarely left her mother's side, making up for lost years in precious remaining hours. They shared stories, looked through old photos, and began healing wounds that had seemed impossible to mend. Elizabeth's journal became a bridge between them, its pages filled with years of unspoken love and regret. "I was so afraid of failing you," Elizabeth confessed one evening, her voice weak but clear. "I never imagined that running away would be the biggest failure of all. But watching you now, your strength, your compassion, I realize you became extraordinary not because of me, but despite me." Peter spent long hours there too, his initial resistance to Elizabeth's return softening as he witnessed her genuine remorse and their daughter's growing peace. The three of them formed a delicate new kind of family unit, different from what they might have been, but precious in its own way. Aaron visited daily, bringing coffee for Peter and fresh flowers for Elizabeth. The twin brothers, so long separated, found healing in shared responsibility for Elizabeth's care. Their identical hands would sometimes reach for the same cup or adjust the same blanket, drawing tired laughs from Elizabeth about seeing double. Nathan discovered a new side of himself as he watched his cousin navigate this bittersweet reunion. He had grown up without a mother, and seeing Diana forge this 11th-hour connection with hers stirred complex emotions. But it also helped him understand his father better, the pain Aaron had carried from their own family's fractures. The night Elizabeth passed was remarkably peaceful. Diana was reading aloud from her mother's journal. Peter held one hand and Aaron the other. Her last words were a whispered thank you for forgiveness, for family, for the chance to make things right. The funeral brought together the entire Hearts Without Homes community. Grace organized the catering, residents arranged flowers, and the children's choir sang hymns. Elizabeth's design students created beautiful memorial boards showcasing her work on the facilities. She had spent her final months teaching them about creating spaces that heal. In the days that followed, their unusual family grew stronger through shared grief. Peter and Aaron's bond deepened as they helped Diana through her loss. The brothers who had lived such different lives found they now spoke the same language, one of compassion, understanding, and renewed purpose. Diana emerged from mourning with a new project transforming Elizabeth's design principles into a standard part of all hearts without homes facilities. Mom understood that beauty isn't a luxury, she explained to the board. It's a form of respect. Every person deserves to live in spaces that lift their spirits. The family healing extended beyond their immediate circle. Aaron and Nathan's relationship evolved into something more authentic, no longer bound by expectations of corporate succession. Peter found himself able to forgive not just Elizabeth, but the system that had separated him from his brother. And Diana discovered that having a complicated family story didn't make it any less valuable. One evening, as the four of them shared a quiet dinner in Aaron's penthouse, Peter raised his glass. To Elizabeth he said softly, "Who taught us that it's never too late to come home." 5 years after its founding, Hearts Without Homes had evolved into a national movement that redefined how America approached homelessness. The original warehouse facility had become a landmark, hosting delegations from cities around the world hoping to replicate its success. But it was the stories of individual transformation that truly measured their impact. Grace, the elderly resident who had once slept in doorways, now ran a catering empire that employed over 50 formerly homeless individuals. Her company provided not just jobs but comprehensive training in business management, allowing employees to eventually start their own ventures. "We don't just teach people to cook," she would say. "We teach them to dream again." The education program, inspired by Diana's journey, had helped hundreds of homeless students enter college. A partnership with Columbia University created dedicated scholarships, while their tutoring program ensured students had the support needed to succeed. Peter headed this initiative, finding profound satisfaction in helping others overcome the barriers he and Diana had faced. Tommy, the boy Diana had saved, became the face of their children's program. Now 11, he excelled in school and dreamed of becoming a doctor. His mother managed the health clinic's administrative office, her nursing certification the first step in a growing medical career. Their story embodied the project's core belief that opportunity, properly supported, could break cycles of poverty. The Mitchell-Warren Foundation's influence extended beyond direct services. Their research department, led by Peter, produced groundbreaking studies on economic inequality that shaped public policy. Cities began adopting their integrated approach to homeless services, recognizing that housing alone wasn't enough. People needed community, opportunity, and dignity. Nathan's business expertise proved invaluable in scaling their impact. He developed innovative financing models that allowed other cities to fund similar projects, while maintaining their commitment to human-centered design. The corporate world began to see social responsibility not as charity but as essential to sustainable business practice. Their success attracted unexpected allies. Real estate developers who had once opposed them now sought their expertise in creating mixed-income communities. Banks offered specialized loans for social enterprise initiatives. Even the most skeptical politicians couldn't argue with the data: crime rates down, employment up, healthcare costs reduced. Diana, having completed law school, spearheaded a legal advocacy program that addressed systemic barriers facing homeless individuals. Her team worked to overturn discriminatory housing policies and protect tenants' rights. She never forgot her own experiences on the streets, using them to inform more compassionate and effective solutions. The project's physical expansion reflected its growing impact. New facilities opened across the country, each adapted to local needs but maintaining core principles of dignity, opportunity, and community. The architecture, influenced by Elizabeth's final designs, created spaces that nurtured hope and fostered connection. Aaron found unexpected fulfillment in his new role as mentor to other business leaders interested in social impact. His transformation from ruthless corporate warrior to advocate for ethical business practices inspired others to reconsider their definitions of success. Warren Industries became known not just for its profits, but for its pioneering approach to corporate responsibility. And international recognition followed. The United Nations adopted their model as a best practice for addressing homelessness. Academic institutions studied their approach. But for those involved, the real success lay in the daily victories: a family moving into their first apartment, a student receiving a college acceptance letter, a business owner hiring their first employee. During their 5th anniversary celebration, Diana stood before a packed auditorium, the audience filled with residents past and present, supporters and staff, family and friends. "We didn't just build homes," she declared. "We built proof that another way is possible. That when we invest in human dignity, when we believe in second chances, when we build communities instead of walls, that's when real change happens." 10 years to the day after Diana found Aaron Warren's credit card on the street, the entire family gathered on the rooftop garden where Elizabeth had spent her final days. The city skyline had changed, dotted now with hearts without homes facilities, each one a beacon of hope in the urban landscape. Diana, now a respected advocate and lawyer, stood at the railing beside Nathan. Their relationship had evolved from adversaries to colleagues to something deeper, their shared commitment to social justice creating a bond that transcended their complex family history. "Sometimes I wonder," she mused, "what would have happened if I'd just kept that credit card." "The money would have helped temporarily," Nathan replied, "but you gave us something far more valuable. You showed us what real wealth looks like. It's not about what you have, but what you give." Peter and Aaron, still mirror images of each other despite the years, sat together reviewing plans for their latest initiative, a nationwide campaign to reform housing policy. The twins who had lived such different lives had found their paths converging in purpose, their combined experiences creating a powerful force for change. The rooftop garden had become a living memorial to Elizabeth, her design principles evident in every carefully chosen plant and thoughtfully placed bench. Though she hadn't lived to see their full success, her influence remained in their commitment to creating spaces that honored human dignity. Tommy, now headed to medical school on a Mitchell Warren Foundation scholarship, helped Grace serve her famous cookies to the gathered crowd. Their stories, like so many others, proved that opportunity combined with support could transform not just individual lives but entire communities. The real lesson, Peter addressed the gathering, isn't about homelessness or housing or even economics. It's about how we see each other. When we strip away the labels society puts on people: homeless, wealthy, privileged, disadvantaged, we're all just human beings deserving of dignity and chance to thrive. Aaron nodded, adding, "And sometimes the greatest privilege isn't in what you can get, but in what you can give. Not just money or resources, but understanding, opportunity, and hope." Diana took center stage, her presence commanding yet humble. 10 years ago, I found a credit card on the street. It could have bought us food, shelter, comfort. Instead, it bought us something priceless: the chance to prove that integrity matters more than circumstances, that community is stronger than adversity, and that every person has value beyond measure. The sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in colors that seemed to celebrate their journey. The city that had once seemed divided by invisible lines of wealth and privilege was slowly becoming more integrated, more compassionate, more human. "Our work isn't finished," Nathan concluded. "There are still people sleeping on these streets, still battles to be fought, still minds to be changed, but we've proven that change is possible. That when we choose love over fear, community over isolation, dignity over despair, that's when miracles happen." As twilight deepened, the lights of the city twinkled like stars fallen to earth. Each light represented a home, a story, a life touched by their work. The family, once divided by circumstance, now united in purpose, stood together, their shadows merging into one. In the end, it wasn't just about homes or programs or policies. It was about recognizing the humanity in each person, about choosing compassion over judgment, about building bridges instead of walls. It was about proving that one small act of honesty could spark a revolution of kindness that would change countless lives. And somewhere in the city below, another lost soul was finding their way to hope. Another heart was opening to possibility. Another life was being transformed by the simple power of human dignity and love. If this story touched your heart and resonated with your beliefs in human dignity and the power of compassion, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What moments moved you the most? How has kindness transformed your own life? Please consider subscribing to support our team in creating more meaningful content that celebrates the triumph of the human spirit. Share this video with friends and family who might find inspiration in Diana's journey. Your likes and engagement help us reach more people with stories that matter. Together we can spread the message that small acts of integrity can spark profound change.